Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hayes' Higher Learning. I'm your host, Ashley Hayes, and I am so excited. Today, I have invited a special guest, Rasheed Copeland from Washington, D.C., to have a conversation with me about toxic masculinity and how we can collectively from a culture of toxic masculinity to divine masculinity. And so we're going to talk about safety and protection and love in the midst of revolution. And so I want to introduce Rasheed to you. Rasheed Copeland is a native of Washington, D.C. He is the author of The Book of Silence, Manhood as a Pseudoscience by Sargent Press, 2015, and is a multiple recipient of the D.C. Commission of the Arts and Humanities Fellowship Award. Rasheed, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, so talk to me a little bit. So I was first introduced to you at the 2015 Individual World Poetry Slam. I had no idea who you were prior, and that would happen in DC. And I remember you took the number 2 spot, and I was completely blown away by you. What have you been up to since then, and what work means the most to you in this midst of revolution and collective reform?
So I've just been up to a lot of writing, a bit of publishing here and there, like in certain journals. Fatherhood, of course, is just always constant. So that I think the work that is most important to me, I guess, at this moment, is the work on self. I think that a lot of us, I think that change starts internally, and until we can individually change ourselves, we won't be able to, I guess, affect the sort of change that we need outwardly. So that's what I'm working on most.
I agree with that, and that's some of the toughest work to do.
Right.
I recently I connected with you on Twitter, and I've seen you do some heavy lifting in regards to educating men specifically on emotional intelligence and how to protect Black women. I got a chance to catch your Instagram Live town hall meeting, which I thought was amazing. What motivated you? Motivates you to do that work? Why is it important to you?
Just it's a very personal work, and the way I could describe it is, I guess, like I said, trying to affect myself so that I, in turn, vibrate out to others. I just know for me personally, when I think about the ways in which I have been told to perform masculinity, the ways in which I've existed as a Black cishet man in America, I've been failed in a lot of ways. And so, like a while back, I saw a lot of those failings affecting the women that I was in community with. And most outright were calling me on it. And I really just had to sit with myself, because there were things that like I knew that I didn't even feel comfortable doing and performing in these ways. But I just felt there was this invisible force that kind of, there were rules that I had to abide by. And so it just came about me just deciding that I didn't want to continue to, inflict harm on myself first, and on others. And so from then, it just really spiraled into just me educating myself, me doing a lot of listening, and just being in community with people who weren't afraid to tell the truth to me, about me.
And being accountable to that truth.
Right. Definitely, because that's the biggest part. People can tell you the truth all day, but if you don't believe it, and if you're very much like, oh no, I don't have any issues, I'm good, like I know I try and all that, then you'll get nowhere.
Absolutely. And what changes do you think that Black men need to prioritize in order to make this shift from toxic masculinity, which to me subjugates women and uses violence to obtain power, to what I like to call divine masculinity, which is where men respect, protect, and elevate the women who are in their communities? What changes do we need to implement first?
Again, we just have to, I think we have to have a very clear understanding of what we are up against. I think we fight a lot of the evils that we feel we are fighting, I think are more symptomatic versus the actual root of our issues. And so because of that, I think we're oftentimes just punching the air versus really getting to the root of our issues. So I think that's the biggest change. For me, I heard you say use the term like teaching and inform Black men. I like to think of it more along the lines of we're all just learning out loud. Just because even though I'm in a better space, I would say, than certain guys, I do recognize that this sort of change, just any sort of change where we are trying to dismantle just whiteness, because it all really stems from there and the many branches of it. When we're dismantling that, it's a constant state of arrival. And so that's one thing that I think that we as men, we need to recognize that, like, there is no finish line for this. There's no, oh, I got here. Now I know how to respect women. I know how to be a better man. It's a constant test. Every situation is going to sharpen you. It's going to test whether or not you are, living what it is you're saying. And sometimes you will fail. Sometimes you'll backlash, like you'll backtrack. But just knowing that that you have to keep going, that there's no end in sight. You will continue to, and hopefully that will affect, and for lack of a better term, give other men permission, because we need that sometimes. A lot of men don't like to agree with that, but we do look at other men for permission. And when, it's hard, when everyone else around is not quite on the same wavelength as you, it does get to a point where you're like, well, am I doing this for the reason? It doesn't seem like it's benefiting me in any way. And so it's good, I think, that the more of us do it, the more of us like really get to the root of like, yo, whiteness is our enemy. That's what it is. It's not our women. It's whiteness and how it has infected us, and in turn animated itself through us and made us agents of it.
I think that there's something there. And I remember actually reading in Bell Hooks and All About Love, she said that one of our biggest barriers to the revolution is that men care what other men think.
Right. And it's the biggest one, because again, we all and for the sake of conversation, we're definitely talking about men, but men don't own, we might have the patent to, I guess, toxic masculinity and patriarchy, but everybody's affected by it, and so even that is, man, we have to recognize that, like, even when we are getting critique, it's not a critique on us. We cannot be so inextricably linked to patriarchy that when somebody challenges misogyny or challenges patriarchy or sexism, that we automatically think it's a dig at us. Why is it that somebody challenges something inherently negative? Why do we take that personal? And so, yeah, like, I think we look so much because everybody's holding up their part of this kind of cult of masculinity, where it's like, oh, is he doing it? Are we doing it? And when we don't, like, we want to be in community. And that's one of the things I can say, for me, trying to live in the way that I live, it gets a little lonelier. Because you do recognize that, for one, some people will not be converted. Some people will not. You won't change their minds. We have to be okay with that. But in turn, that means that a lot of people, you have to just distance yourself from. You have to kind of, you won't be able to participate in some of the misogynistic just exploits in which you really built a lot of your identity on. And you built a lot of your friendships and relationships. They're forged in this hatred for women, specifically Black women. We bond as Black men. You see it everywhere. We bond over the hatred of Black women in a way that is just insidious. Like, it just makes no sense. That is our point of camaraderie. The subjugation of a Black woman, like, where we connect. Like, and all else. I always, I drive now, but I used to always catch the Uber. And it never failed. Like, when I had like a Black guy Uber, the one talking point that there will always would be the subjugation of women. Always. Like, and I'm a yo, please don't say anything to me while I'm in this Uber. Like, I'm in this my head on type of guy. but
Uh-huh.
it never minds. It's like they look in that rearview mirror like, hey, you hate women? Like, and then we're like, yo, no, it's not. Like, we don't have to bond over this, bro. Like, but it's
Right.
weird because we know it as such a default. Like, it all else fails. If I don't know anything about this man, if I don't have anything, so long as he is quote unquote heterosexual, chances are I can bond with him over, kind of taking digs at women, kind of,
Yes,
being
exactly.
this boys club sort of idea. And so we have to, that's the biggest part. We have to stop caring about what other men think. Like, it's just really that simple. Like, we have to get to a point where we are just like, yo, I don't care what this looks like to you. I'm going to stand up and do what I know to be right. Because deep down, I think if we all search our heart, like, it's miserable it's miserable. Like, this is all you can do. Like, it's misery, really.
Yeah. 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 And thank you for saying that. I think it's very insightful and thoughtful. And I wonder, Rasheed, what are the most valuable lessons that you've learned or that you've learned from women along this journey?
Oh gosh. Everything I've learned from this journey, I would posit, has come from Black women, without a doubt. Like, and I say that not even in in the sense of hyperbole, like that's just the truth. Um, because again, Black women have an investment in unlearning this stuff. Because again, like I say, everybody has it in us. We all animate it differently. We all benefited from it differently, but we all have it in us. But those who are on the receiving end of the harm that comes from it, of course, they have more of an investment to unlearn it. And in turn, teach those who are harming to unlearn it. So that it's like, hey, let's, de-weaponize, like your person, like who you are. So just everything. Learning what the ideas surrounding gaslighting has been big for me, because we don't, just as people and especially men, we don't believe that two realities can be true at the same time. So even if we're in front of a woman and we see something go down that, she feels a way about, we're looking at it through the lens of maleness, masculinity, and all these sorts of things that, like, we just won't be able to see it that way. It's like when dudes are catcalling women and she's clearly disrespected. And our first thought is, well, that's a compliment. Like, like we thinking, in our world,
experience.
it is.
Yeah.
It's weird that way. Like, like they're literally telling you, no, that's not a compliment to me. And then we're like, well, I beg to differ. Like, I know you've lived with yourself for a long time. I know you are a woman and it's your life. However, I'm going to beg to differ. Like, there's no way you feel harmed by me saying what I said. Like, and it's just recognizing that, like, yo, we have to take what women are saying at face value. And like I always say, the parallels to whiteness are just so uncanny. So I always try to stick with those, even though a lot of dudes, they don't like the idea of being compared to white men. But like,
no.
ultimately,
no, not at all.
That's right. But ultimately, that's what it is. And not even white men, so to speak, but it's like we are perpetrators of whiteness, of white supremacy.
Of white supremacy, for sure.
Hatred.
Absolutely.
Right. Like, we are the ones who carry it. We are the ones, and in turn, when we're animating it and we're, performing it, we look like it. Same way an actor who Denzel looks like, a crooked cop in Training Day because he's performing as a crooked cop. So if you're performing as a white guy, and trying to reap these benefits that you'll never reap, you're going to appear that way to people. And so, yeah, like what it's there, like in all of the ways in which we, like interact with people, it's there. And the privilege of just being blinded to so many people's lives because it doesn't
affect you.
Right, exactly. We don't have any skin in the game. I always say, like, they don't affect you the same way. And so you're just like, well, that can't be the truth because I've never been catcalled. I've never been, I've never had somebody comment on my legs in a skirt.
Right.
Like,
nobody's approached me on my way to my car,
Right. Right. I've never been, just disrespected as a woman. It's like, you're not a woman. And that's why you've never been, disrespected in that way. But yeah, the gaslighting piece was, it was major for me. out of everything. I mean, all of it is, but like that was a major point where it just made me realize, because I always just say it's not the world. I would always, argue with women, ex-girlfriends, everybody. I'm like, yo, it's the way you're taking it. It's the way you're perceiving it. It's the way you're perceiving it. And they're like, no, like that's not like how it goes. And so I had to really unlearn that like, yo, no, it's not the way we're perceiving it. It's going to be perceived differently by different people because we all function from different vantage points. When you're low on the totem pole, it's going to look the certain things coming down at you might be a little more harmful versus you're high, when you're higher on that totem pole.
Right. Wow. Yeah. I mean, you saying a word right now, Rasheed. And I'm so glad you're doing the work, and it's so good to hear. What books and resources have been valuable to your education, especially about like emotional intelligence and then reimagining your masculinity?
A lot. I will start by just saying following the right people on Twitter has been monumental for me because there's this idea, men, we always like, oh, teach me black woman. For free, black woman.
For free.
Right,
that
for the
part.
free, always. And I am definitely of the idea that, like, I had to learn, like, it is not on any black woman to teach us and put that labor in. However, I will posit that all day, every day, no matter where you go, black women are teaching. It just really requires us to listen. Not even ask questions. When we got questions, we can ask sometimes, but again, don't expect an answer. You have questions, that's when you start looking it up. Black woman tweets something about this, that, third, and she uses the word like misogyno. Don't bother her to try to explain
what you mean by that.
Right. You can look that up. It's definitely that's it. Quick, open up a tab, put it on your phone. Like, you can do that. Like, I think it's a
doing
weird
your
way.
Own work.
Right. Because it's a way in which black men weaponize being complacent. It's this red herring that we always use. Like, well, y'all not willing to teach us. Y'all say we want it. Like, y'all say y'all want it to change, but y'all not willing to teach us. When the fact is, black women are the master course. They've been teaching, been telling us, yo, I don't like it when you do this that way. I don't like the way you speak to me this way. I don't like the way you treat me this. You were a little biased in this way. You were this way. And we, again, because our perceptions of that is different, we refuse to learn from that versus, it's always, that's a proactive learning to me, just listening in general, where the black woman is not talking to you, but she's talking about some incident she might have had with her husband or some guy at work or boss or whatever. And she's telling you clearly how this affected me. You can listen and learn from that without having to get to the, that whole devil's advocate thing that a lot of us do as men. Where we just, what is this? Or what is this? Like, changing the reality of what's happening so far, where it's like, look, what are we even talking about? Like, what are these hypotheticals we're going through right now? I'm saying that this X is happening, and I'm tired of it happening. So that's been a big resource. Just sitting at the feet of black women and just listening, not asking no questions, taking notes. Like, if it's something I don't understand, going to write it down, jot it down. And then even from that, that's been where I've gotten a lot of other resources. Where I, like, learned the bell hooks, learned of like Michelle Wallace and Audre Lorde and June Jordan, like all of these other black women, feminists, and, just listening, like literally, like just black women just dropping game. And then, you go to your bookstore, you go look up this book, look up this resource, you read this article that they wrote, and you read. And again, I always like to put a caveat on read. We know that some people are illiterate, some people are illiterate. That's just not the way they will learn. But there's all sorts of ways you can get this information, even if you're not visually, like, just reading. So yeah, like the books, for sure. I was talking about when we recently did the IG live, just discussing The Will to Change by Bell Hooks, and at the end of it, numbers kind of dwindling down, but I just made a point to say, like, that not only should we be listening to the, like the written work, where Bell Hook is clearly making a pointed attempt to speak about how patriarchy is, affecting us. How,
Mm-hmm.
like those are important as well. But also, just going kind of harkening back to what I was just saying, like reading the books written by women that are not necessarily about the struggle of being a woman, but like the life, like just in general, I think
Mm-hmm.
helped me because it helps me in a way that takes my gaze away from women of being these very that are
Mm-hmm.
contingent upon what I want from them, what I need from them, and recognize
Mm-hmm.
that they have whole lives. They don't disappear when I blink. They don't, just stop existing when I sleep. Like they are
Mm-hmm.
people unto themselves. And the same way Toni Morrison is writing in this book about these characters who do not know me, don't care about me, don't, like have nothing to offer me. All women are that way. Like, like they exist outside of what they can offer us. So even just reading reading the literature, and just learning about women in general, I think goes a long way, because it does undo this idea that, okay, women can only serve me in this way.
Mm-hmm.
Because the moment we get that kind of scheme to set in our heads that this is what women, this is what Black women especially, they can only serve me in this way, that way. The moment Black women show up in the many multitudes that they show up in, then we got to do all this work to kind of fight against what we knew, like, because now we're offended that somebody showed up in a way that wasn't how we had kind of set up in our mind for them. We had this
And they
box
perceive it as
prepared.
threatening.
Right, exactly. We had this box prepared for them. They showed up, Black women literally in the vastness of, like Eve Jane, like got everything in them. So they're going to show up differently. And like the first thing we did, like I said, oh, somehow I'm offended by this. Like, how are you offended by somebody else showing up?
Right. How dare you?
Right. And then we ready to attack. And I think just knowledge of people in general, and women in general can help combat that. Like that, you might get a woman who is funnier than you, smarter than you, just smart in general. But like, and these are things you should be threatened by. Might be stronger than you. Might have more game than you. Like, like might be more heartless than you. Like,
Mm-hmm.
these
Mm-hmm.
sorts of things that reject all the ideas that we have about femininity and womanhood. We have to just hold space for that, I think. And the way we hold space for that is by reading women, learning about women, in ways that are not centered, or I guess fixed in the male gaze, fixed
Yeah.
through the male gaze, so to speak.
Yeah.
Preposition again at one point.
Yeah. But I think that is so on point. Is there any particular moment or passage or part of The Will to Change by Bell Hooks that really speaks to you or that you found to be your favorite?
Yeah. So this is like a two-part answer. I can't even. I'm gonna try to find the one part. The other part I underlined, but I got so much stuff underlined in this book that I'm having. But there was a point because again, I guess before I get into it, we as Black men, I think a lot of us the aversion to changing and doing that sort of thing because sometimes it can be framed as we are only doing this for women, so that women can be equal, so that women can
Mm-hmm.
feel better. When in actuality, we're doing it so that we can be free. That's the first
Mm-hmm.
and foremost. And I always try to tell the homies like, yo, dude, if you need, like, we're all self-serving in general, like
Mm-hmm.
self-preservation is the key to life, do it for yourself first. That's the only way it'll ever stick is you do it for yourself and recognize that you've been failed by patriarchy, not in the same ways, but you've been failed in a lot of ways. And in turn, because you've been failed, you failed a lot of people. And so I like this book because it kind of points at that, like, yo, let's focus on the men, not how, like it does focus on how what we go through affects the women, but it's really focused on, how can we, you know, save ourselves?
Yeah.
So there's a part where it's talking about, when we're little as young boys or whatever, like the first betrayal for the sake of upholding patriarchy. The first betrayal is not necessarily us betraying a woman or a young girl. It's us betraying ourselves,
Yeah.
cutting off our ties to when we were once pure, when we weren't bogged down by the ideas of uh, just dominance and, like funneling all of our identity into just these very sexual, dominant, violent modes of being. So there's that part. And then there's the part in chapter 7 that talks about feminist manhood. My homie Jeremy, he has a podcast called Let's Talk, Bruh. Wonderful podcast for any Black man trying to,
I like
unpack
that podcast. Yeah.
Wonderful. So he was on the he was on the IG Live and he was talking about the chapter in chapter 7 where it was just talking about feminist manhood. And it reminded me of, like you were saying, but like the divine masculinity. I think it's in a similar vein as that. But it was saying that it was something about it presupposing. I'm trying to read it exactly. Oh, here it is. It says feminist masculinity presupposes that it is enough for males to have value, that they do not have to do to perform, to be affirmed or loved, rather than defining strength as power over feminist masculinity, defines strength as one's capacity to be responsible for self and others. And that, it hit me because it reminds me of how Bell Hooks always had the long sentence where she's like imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy. Like, to me, it just hits on that, where we have to realize that, like, the way we even exist as men is capitalistic in nature, just because we have to produce in order to be valued. We have to be this sort of way. There's a contingency upon which we're able to be loved when we decide that, I'm going to be this provider, protector, gatherer, conqueror. And I know that,
right, yes, yes.
Twitter. I was saying this on Twitter that a lot of people who are positive, like, well, no, men are always, no matter what, men are forgiven, men are loved. Men are, done unconditionally. I would posit that the condition that we are loved under is the fact that we are men. That's all the underlying condition, But like, as I've seen in my own life, the moments we decide to abandon what makes us quote unquote men, that love does dwindle a little bit, like from both sides.
That's accurate. Yeah.
It does, when we don't present ourselves in ways that are, quote unquote masculine or hyper masculine.
Buying into this idea.
Exactly. And that's what it is. And that's try to tell homes, like, you can't be mad at a woman because, the nice guy sent his last, all that nonsense. Like, we will lean on that. Well, women, they say they want this. I'm like, well, look, you can't blame them because they're under the same sky we're under. We're all socialized in the same way. So be mad at the system itself. Don't be mad at the perpetrators of it. Be mad at the system in and of itself. In the same way I would tell men, don't be mad at yourself. Be mad at the system that's like literally using you, bro. Like using you well. Like you ain't got no control over this. You just letting it use you, like devil working it.
For sure. Like, exactly. You become a pawn of the system for sure.
Right. And so like that's what I appreciate that, because it does give me hope. That I can continue forth and just be loved, not for anything that is connected to my gender performance.
Yes.
And that's a very internal thing, because we know the world is falling down around, and there's so many people, for every person like you and I who are on this podcast chopping up, trying to do the right thing, there are a manifold of people who are just not. They're never going to get it. They're not going to want to. And these are the people you interact with. These are the people who are, like that that when you affirm yourself and who and how you're going to be, these people are very much going to test it when you're juxtaposed against them. Like, they're going to test it. Your family members who will never get it, your older homies, they're always going to be constantly bumping against what you say you believe. But when you have rooted yourself, I think, in this very unconditional, where you love yourself no matter what. I think that's back that is like, if I'm going to take on quote unquote the feminist manhood, or, like divine masculinity, so to speak, I have to make it enough for myself before I even take it out to anybody else. They're like, no matter how I show up in this world, yes, I identify as man, as male, but no matter what, none of that matters. I'm going to love myself. Even if I don't look like a man this day, even if I don't act like, quote unquote, a man that day and do it, I love myself. Whether I'm wearing something that looks feminine, I love myself. So that when everybody else around inevitably tests that, I'll know. Like, yeah, your love might be contingent upon me doing this, but I know that I'm a person, I'm a being outside of this. And because of that, I'm going to extend that same grace to any and everybody else.
Yep, yep. When we choose ourselves first, when we honor ourselves first, then everything else takes shape after that.
Right.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And Rasheed, one of the pieces that I first heard you do, and it still moves me, is this piece you did called "My Man's in Them," which is a
Yeah.
conversation about those toxic homies. I would be honored if you would share it with my audience.
Yes, of course. Funny thing, like you said, we met at I guess iWeb, so to speak. And I did that poem on Final Stage. That poem was not even planned to be in any of the competition.
Yo.
My homie Pages, he was doing a lot of it. And so he was just asking me about it because he couldn't really say much because he was like one of the facilitators of the event that year. So he kind of had to be biased, even though he's technically our DC rep, like coach
Yeah,
manager
he could.
for,
I went
you
crazy
know,
though. I went crazy.
yeah, like, and so he was, because people in DC had heard it for like at least a year. And he was just like, well, what about that? And in my mind, I'm just like, well, this ain't really a quote unquote, anybody knows slam, quote unquote. To me, it didn't seem like that poem that you performed. Like, it was just something that I wrote because, like, I think about, my homies, like, think about all that what we talk about. Wow. It might not sound as intellectual as we might have just made it sound. But, like, I'm from around the way. Like, we talk to homies and we go through these sorts of things, even if we can't articulate all of the emotions in our body, so to speak. So I was just like, yo, I'm just writing it for that. And he was like, yo, you might want to, if you get in the jam, and sure enough, I did. And it just, since then, everybody seems to love that poem.
Crazy.
And I
It's one
love
of
it
my
too.
faves.
Yeah, like I love it too. So yeah, I'm glad that I did. Shout out to Pages for like giving me that nudge. Like, no, I consider it, man. Like people could just want to hear it. All right, so I'm gonna drink this water and I will start.
Okay.
I should know that I haven't performed in a while. But I performed this poem so much I should, if I mess up,
You gotta go in, poet.
My man's in them is beautiful, but will hurt you if you call them, treat them as such. They're God, prison industrial, and Oedipus complex. Got girlfriends for fathers. Will not kiss them in public, but will leave hickeys on the neck of a bottle of Hennessy until the burn feels like a love in their chest. My man's in them don't do well with affection. Swear they ain't emotional. My man's in them don't know that anger is an emotion that rules them into loving with their fist. Left hooks make hay out of their toddler's chest, turns their sons into brick walls just like them. But my man's in them will die for their daughters, just won't live for their daughters' mothers. Closest thing they get to an I love you is a monthly deposit or a bouquet full of knuckles. My man's in them stay not loving these hoes. But my man's in them is hoes. So they stay not loving themselves. My man's in them put all their bros before all their hoes and yet still are oddly homophobic. Spend all their time manning up. Never got to be boys. Lost their virginities at 12 but swear they are not abused. My man's in them use fucking as a political tool. It is one of the only ways they have ever known how to exercise power. My man's in them pull out game strong. But that baby ain't got my eyes game even stronger. My man is in real. They are School of Hard Knock, GED, jail GED, Lincoln Tech trained, magna cum laude, PhD, but can't read between the lines. Wrinkled in a woman's brow, she politely declines their advances. No, no, no. My man's in them want to know if your man allow you to have friends. Can he handle competition? And when all else fails, my man's in them got a million reasons loaded in the chamber why they ain't like your ass anyway. My man's in them love pussy, hate women, especially the black ones. My man's in them dream of running away to where the grass is blonder. And long gone are the women who house them like organs, who mourn them and crown them and raise them from the dead. My man's in them are self-healing, lick wounds with forked tongues and spit a swisher better than Moses can part the Red Sea. better than social services can split up their families. My mans and them head of household at age 13. Same age they learned magic, how to make a dime bag disappear with the slap of a five. Same age they learned alchemy, untucked the steel and turned it into a stranger's gold, run pockets the way white men run stock markets, live in a shoebox economy, 401k plan hidden beneath the Sealy Posturepedic. My mans in them is beautiful, but can't feel it. Only smile for the mortician, only cry at funerals. And every time they decide to breathe, my mans and them don't know no better. Yet I do, and never checked them, never showed them better. And I am beginning to wonder exactly what that says about me.
Hmm.
Oh,
Thank you, Rasheed. I have to take a moment after that
no,
because
thank you.
as a storyteller, I'm there. I'm there, with these men, and I thank you for your honesty, for your vulnerability, for your work, for sitting here with me today and having this conversation is a part of the work that I do, which is to make education about self and about business and about love more accessible. And I do that through free podcasts. So y'all can share this podcast with your mans and them, your homies. And Rasheed, how can people reach out to you and find out more about the work you do?
Yeah, I'm on all of the socials. You can just type my name in, Rasheed Copeland, Rasheed, Copeland, Copeland. If you want the quicker route, most of my handles on Twitter and Instagram are Sheed Emilio, SheedEmilio. Again, my work is very organic in a way that it's just me existing out loud, me learning out loud, so to speak. And so, yeah, it's all there. It's all Twitter. It's there, just there, being.
So y'all make sure you search for Rasheed, follow Rasheed on Instagram. And Rasheed, I saw that you were doing a book giveaway for The Will to Change by Bell Hooks. I would love for Hazel's Higher Learning to contribute 5 copies to that giveaway. Should people just
That
reach out to you?
wonderful. Yes,
Yeah,
definitely
happy to
so.
do it.
Yeah, that
So
would
they
be
can just find you on Instagram and Twitter for those.
yes.
Okay. So you all message Rasheed. I'll make sure the books get to Rasheed in DC. Thank you again. And thank you all for tuning into Hayes' Higher Learning. The song of the week I thought was appropriate for the conversation is Pink Matter by Frank Ocean.
Okay.
Yeah. And thank you so much for tuning in to Hayes' Higher Learning, where together we are learning better, doing better, and being better. I'll see you all next week.